If I can encourage everyone to take their seats again, and a very warm welcome to all of you for the 2025 edition of the EBRD Literature Prize. It's a great pleasure to see many of you here at the auditorium and also joining us online from around the world. We'll be getting underway very shortly, but just to flag some of those small but important housekeeping points, that in the likely event of any sort of emergency, you'll be guided to the exit by my very capable colleagues here, and they will ensure your safe exit from the building. If anyone needs medical assistance, again, we have that on hand. It will be to support you as required. But hopefully the only drama that happens is here on stage. And this evening we have our very distinguished panel of judges here, and they will be introducing you shortly to the three finalists that they have chosen, both authors and translators, and inviting them onto the stage to join to discuss what it was about their work that stood out exceptional in a very crowded field of submissions. As chair of judges, we have delighted to welcome back Dr. Jaggi, the award-winning writer, critic, cultural journalist, and artistic director. Maya is a contributing art critic at the Financial Times and was a cultural writer and fiction critic for the Guardian Review for a decade, profiling writers on 5 continents and interviewing 15 Nobel laureates in literature, and in 2023 was elected Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature. Maya is joined here by her fellow judges on stage, academic Uilleam Blacker, writer Selma Dabbagh, and also on the screen, journalist Fergal Keane, and we'll introduce them properly in due course. But before we get underway, I just want to ask our Secretary General, Mr. Kazuhiko Koguchi, to welcome you on behalf of EBRD and officially start proceedings.
Thank you, Edward, and good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this event at our headquarters in Canary Wharf. Our President, Olusegun Obasanjo, is traveling outside of the UK this week, so I will be speaking on her behalf. Now, in its 8th year, the Literature Prize celebrates the contemporary creativity of the regions where the bank operates. It helps bring literature from a wide range of countries to a global readership through the art of translation. As Secretary General of the EBRD for another 4 weeks, I am particularly proud to host these awards since my department oversees event management, language services, as well as the team managing the community initiative itself. I'm also grateful to our colleagues in communications and corporate services, and finally, of course, to our shareholders, who provide the funds to sponsor the prize, for which we are very grateful. In addition to welcoming many distinguished outside visitors, I'm also pleased that our staff have the opportunity to discover more about the heritage and culture of the places where we operate. Many of our international workforce are here in the auditorium or online. In recent years, the Literature Prize has recognized how writers in our regions have responded to the challenges of environmental degradation, social exclusion, democratic backsliding, and of course the war on Ukraine. And these themes resonate closely with the bank's own priorities, including those set out in our new 5-year strategy, recently approved by the governors at our annual meeting here in London. We are truly grateful to have such a distinguished panel of the judges joining us today to share the outcome of their tireless reading and vigorous discussion over many months. I want to stress that the judges are fully independent of the bank in their decision-making, and we haven't been told who the winner is, but we don't have long to wait. All 3 finalists are thoroughly deserving of their place on stage tonight, and I am delighted that the authors and translators have taken the time to be with us tonight. You will hear from each of them shortly in conversation with the judging panel. If you haven't read them already, I hope that this will encourage you to explore these works and others from our countries of operation. So, on behalf of the EBRD and lovers of the literature everywhere, our sincere thanks to the authors, the translators, and of course the publishers who make these the books possible, and to the judges for bringing them to our attention. We are looking forward very much to hearing from you soon. Good luck, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Edward and Kazu. And indeed, thank you for coming on this sweltering day. So the so-called American Chekhov, Raymond Carver, said that good fiction is partly a bringing of the news from one world to another. As you've heard, the EBRD Literature Prize enters into that spirit by bringing great fiction from the world in which the bank operates, more than 30 countries on 3 continents, to a wider readership, while at the same time honoring the crucial role of translators and publishers in spreading that news. The bank, as many of you know, was set up after the fall of the Berlin Wall to operate in countries emerging from often contested histories. In such places, above all, it is vital to nurture a robust literary culture that also asks difficult questions and tackles sensitive subjects. The bank does not just sponsor this literary prize, as many do, but it originated it. And I'd like to pay tribute to its maturity and vision with all its shareholders for upholding the principle of the writer's freedom of expression in this sometimes difficult terrain, and indeed of the independence of the prize jury. The format of this award adheres to that of the Independent Foreign Fiction Prize, which pioneered the rewarding of novelists and translators equally. But it's unique in its focus on countries in transition, often troubled regions, at times in open conflict, that are producing some of the most innovative and boundary-pushing fiction anywhere in the world. The admission since last year of North American as well as European publishers, including in the UK, affords a more comprehensive picture of English translations from these countries. And this year saw a record number of submissions. Our shortlist of books, shortlist of 10 in fact, all of which we commend to you, ranges from raw yet poetic vignettes of flash fiction written in present-day Ukraine to a blood feud in southeast Turkey and a propulsive 400-page novel in a single sentence about the rise of the far right in the heart of Europe. That several of these books are based on real people or events, from Kafka's lovers to Stalin's Romanian deportees, raises questions that we debated as a jury on the role and responsibilities of fiction in a so-called post-truth age. Our 3 finalist books emerged unanimously, with women's voices rising inexorably to the fore. Before we hear from the finalists, I'd like to bring in my fellow judges. On my left, Uilleam Blacker is Associate Professor in Ukrainian and East European Culture at University College London, and a literary translator from Ukrainian, Russian, and Polish. He's the author of Memory, the City, and the Legacy of World War II in East Central Europe, and he co-hosts the Ukraine Shelf, a podcast with Olga Kromechuk, speaking to leading writers about Ukraine and its place in the world. To his left, Selma Dabbagh is a British-Palestinian writer and lawyer. Her first novel, Out of It, was nominated as a Guardian Book of the Year and won first prize in the Premio Spoleto in Umbria. She edited the lauded anthology We Wrote in Symbols, Love and Lust by Arab Women Writers. And her writing includes short stories, screenplays, and most recently, Asmahan, a musical play at Sadler's Wells. Joining us remotely, because inevitably he is on assignment abroad, is Fergal Keane, one of the world's most experienced war reporters. As foreign correspondent for BBC News, he has reported from war zones such as Afghanistan, Iraq, Northern Ireland, Rwanda, Somalia, and Ukraine, and his prizes for journalism include BAFTA, Peabody, and Emmy Awards. His books range from Season of Blood, A Rwandan Journey, which won the Orwell Prize, to The Madness, a memoir of war, fear, and PTSD. So welcome to you all. Uilleam, I'd like to start by asking you what you were looking for in this whole reading process, and indeed what surprised or impressed you in reading for this prize.
I mean, I suppose I was looking to be surprised and impressed. I mean, a few. First of all, we were looking at fiction. We're looking at mainly novels. So I was kind of looking for novels that were doing something interesting with the form, with the genre, because the novel is a famously flexible genre which can do pretty much anything, but not all novelists take advantage of all those possibilities. So I was kind of looking for novels that were really doing something that I felt like I hadn't seen before with the form. But I was also looking for novels which could say something about the specific places that they had come out of, about their context, but which would also, of course, be relevant to more universally. And with the three finalists, I think we really got books that are, you learn a lot about the places that produce these books, but they're also reflections on memory, on violence, on war, on gender, all of these kind of big questions that we're thinking about wherever we are in the world. And the last thing was I was looking at it through the eyes of a translator, and kind of trying to look for novels which I thought had been translated really well. Obviously, I couldn't go and read the originals of all these novels. I had read the originals of some of them, the Ukrainian ones. But as a translator, you can kind of tell, even though you might not know the original language, you can sort of tell where a translator has vaulted over those obstacles with particular grace, I suppose. So I was kind of looking out for really well-produced translations. So those were my main criteria.
Selma, you're a novelist yourself, and I wondered what you were looking for and what you discovered.
Thank you, Maya. Good evening, everyone, and thank you to the EBRD for having me here. Really quite similar to Uilleam, but also I think for me as somebody on the panel, I had probably the least familiarity with the regions which most of the literature came from. So for me, it was an entry point into these worlds through fiction, which made it very alive and would transport me to those particular locales. I sometimes wasn't familiar with the history beforehand, so I needed the book to be able to give me enough for that world to stay alive for me. What I really loved with this prize, compared to other prizes I've judged, is the experimentation with form that was alluded to already, and the feeling that the storytellers, the writers, really had an experience, an idea, a story that they were dying to get across in its truest form. And to do that, they sometimes had to mold the structure around that event. So it wasn't experimentation for experimentation's sake. It was like to transmit that truth in the most effective way possible. I also liked humor, and I want to believe if little touches of humor, absurdity can bring a page alive. And I think just wanting to know what happens at some level, although it doesn't have to be a page turner, but just that engagement in the text, which makes you curious about the writer's voice, about the way that they think, the way they look at the world, how the characters are going to respond, what are their moral choices. So these things were informing my assessment of this really wide-ranging and quite eclectic selection that we had, but a wonderful insight to a world that I didn't know very much about, worlds I didn't know very much about.
Indeed, and can I turn to Fergal, who is also on the screen here. Fergal, what was it like for you to turn to fiction from the midst of your war reporting? And what were you hoping for and struck by? Fergal, we can't hear you yet, so I'm sure...
Now you can hear me, I believe?
We can, thank you.
Unmuted. Yeah, I was saying that, fiction to me, I remember coming out of the Rwandan genocide, and I wrote myself at the time that the true telling of this story would have to be for the novelists and the poets. That I think journalism reached a certain point beyond which it couldn't convey the emotional truths, the spiritual truths of the experience of a genocide. And for me, this was just the most inspiring experience. And that had to do with two things, really. My wonderful panel of fellow judges, and, you know, to sit with them and discuss the literature that we've been given, and to debate and agree and disagree, and just the sheer enthusiasm for literature. It brought me back to a much younger version of myself, you know, which is something you'll always welcome, I have to say. And as well, coming out of, I spent a great deal of time covering the Middle East recently, and to come from that environment where there's a great deal of cynical politics going on, and to just focus on books, to focus on literature. It was I would call it a kind of cleansing experience. The most important thing, of course, obviously, was the quality of writing and translation, which was hugely impressive. But also the themes, and the other judges have averred to this, the themes that were addressed. I have to say, controversial as it may be, that compared to much of the literature that I've been reading from Western Europe and America in recent years, the best of the novels and the poetry we read for this prize, they felt to me just far more ambitious, and because of that, important. They were works that had things to say, books of ideas, unafraid of tackling the legacies of war, of sexual politics, and the authoritarian drift that besets our worlds. You know, the way in which big history, old history, is still trampling into small lives in these regions. So I learned a great deal, and I'm just profoundly grateful for the experience of judging.
To come to Uilleam again, there were 3 Ukrainian novels on our short list of 10. And what does that say to you about writing in time of war and Ukrainian literature, war starting from the 2017 annexation of Crimea, and also about publishing and translation?
Yeah, I think it's the presence of the Ukrainian text on the list speaks to something about the publishing industry. If we had been carrying out the same exercise 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we would have had far, far fewer of those Ukrainian authors. It was, and as you know, as someone who's been working on Ukrainian literature for a couple of decades now, really, and trying to get people interested, it was very, very difficult. It was a real struggle. And then after 2022, you didn't have to go looking. People came looking for you. And now we're seeing those novels coming through, because it takes a while to translate a novel, obviously. So it doesn't come through in weeks, but it's a few months. It's a couple of years later. So we're seeing this kind of upsurge, and it's a kind of bittersweet moment, I suppose, for someone who's been following Ukrainian culture and trying to get people to look at it and kind of find out about it for such a long time, because people are really doing that, and it's amazing, and it's so wonderful that journalists want to write about it and that people want to publish it. But you also kind of feel like if this had happened before there was a war, maybe there would have been a kind of higher level of understanding in the West in particular about what Ukraine is, about what's happening in Ukraine, about what are the historical and cultural and political contexts of what's happening there. Because in 2022, believe me, there was a real lack of understanding, lack of public understanding, lack of understanding in the media. And things like novels and films and plays and all these kind of things, they really help to just raise a kind of general awareness, understanding, sympathy for a place. And if you don't have those stories being told through translation, and this is why translation is so important, then you don't have that understanding. And public understanding feeds into political action. All of these things go in a cycle. So I have also those feelings. So it's a kind of mixed feelings I have about it. But I'm very pleased.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to have to cut that short because I think these discussions will come with the authors again. Thank you all for now. And now we're moving to the finalists in alphabetical order. And first beginning with sons, daughters. Can I please ask Ivana Bodrožić and Ellen Elias-Bursać to join me on stage, please? And indeed, can I ask Fergal, I will hand over to Fergal to speak to you.
Hello, and I hope you're hearing me loud and clear where you are. Can I just say what a wonderful, poetic and intelligent book. It's just so full of compassion, but also understanding. And for me, it transcended all standard definitions of fiction or any kind of pigeonholing. Ivana, can I ask you, what inspired you to write this novel?
Okay, thank you for such a beautiful words, and thank you everyone for being here tonight, and thank to the jury for reading my novel. I'm very lucky to be here, but this novel in Croatia went out 5 years ago, and I started to write this novel in 2018. Maybe you don't know, but it was time in Croatia that we needed to acknowledge and ratify Istanbul Convention, and it is one document that was made to fight against the violence toward women. And some of the smaller, radical, but very loud group in Croatia just wanted to use it toward sexual minorities. So we had a lot of acts of violence in Croatia at that time. And I was thinking that, you know, when you have a little bit of life experience, you know that you are, every one of us is minority in some part in their life. And I was thinking that no one is really interested in that topic. And of course, time will pass and everything will be more or less fine. But those people who needed to endure what was happening in Croatia at that moment, they couldn't speak for themselves. So just taking the basic human experience, how is that to be humiliated? How is that to be a part of group? I'm telling that because I grew up in refugee camp during the war in Croatia, so I knew something about that feeling. And I just wanted to write a story which can tell not how is the specific minority life looks like then how we are all connected and how we can understand each other really, really well if we want to do that. So yeah, it was a long journey toward the novel, but I'm really grateful that I had enough time and inspiration to write it.
And Fergal, I think we have an extract, a video extract before Ellen, so if
On Monday morning, after the weekend, while she talks with a colleague about how a gastrostomy would possibly be preferable to the nasogastric tube that has damaged the tube of my pharynx, and which she thinks might push me to contract pneumonia again if only one single tiny microscopic bit of food goes down the wrong way. She looks deep into my eyes. I push every ounce of life force in me toward the paper-thin skin of my eyelids. I squeeze, I go wild and howl at my eyelashes. I force an ocean into my eyes in hopes that it will gush over all the dams, as if I'd been left unattended for a moment by my kidnappers in a dark cellar when I happened on a crack leading to the outside world. All the noise I make evaporates into silence, but still she leans over and suddenly speaks to me directly. To me, After 2 months of non-living, someone speaks to me with 4 words. 4 ordinary words, short, so often uttered. They assume the shape of a bright red life preserver above my head. Can you hear me? I jump up, prance around the room, lunge animal-like to grab the life preserver, squint as if the whole sun has come down into my face. My pulse throbs. She becomes more and more convinced, looks at the screen and says, slow now, slow now. If you hear me, blink. Oh my God. Now she has turned to fully face me. She opens space inside herself and sees me. Excited, she says, I'm going to ask you a few questions. If your answer is yes, blink once. If your answer is no, blink twice. And suddenly, through the crack in my eyelids, shines a slender ray of light.
Thank you, Fergal. Do come back.
I think I need to be let back. Somebody needs to let me back in.
We can see you and hear you.
Yes, but can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
You can hear me now.
Yes.
Okay, great. Ellen, as translator, you carry several responsibilities. Fidelity to the letter, the spirit, the intelligence of the work. And I'm just wonder, with this novel, what was for you the most acute responsibility in translation?
Well, this is it coming across? Okay, here we go. This novel has 3 characters. We heard that first voice, there's a second and a third, and each of them has this very articulate internal life which comes across in each of their narrations, which was very powerful and very important. This particularly this first character, because she has something called locked-in syndrome, and she can only communicate by the blinking of her eyes, but she's experiencing everything around her, and that internal experience sort of sets the stage for the whole novel and the internal experiences of the other 2 characters. And so that sort of nuanced internal world was what I sort of worked with the whole time as translating.
And finally, can I go back to Ivana and just ask you if, in the current climate that we're witnessing, particularly in Europe, but not just in Europe, of growing authoritarianism, do you think the writer, and the writer of fiction and of poetry, can stand in any meaningful way against the kind of misinformation and the closing down of spaces that we're seeing?
Yes, thank you for that question. It's very important because often we hear something that is like engaged literature, and then on the other side is real literature. So, but I think when you look in the history of literature, all the great works that we have today, from Kafka, Dostoevsky, Agota Christoph, we can see that it's deeply, deeply engaged literature, but engaged for defending of human dignity. So, and this is the best always what remains from, I would say, human race and our dignity, that we can fight for each other to live in a better world. So I think that we are, as a writers, and like anyone else, we don't live in sort of vacuum, and it's really hard to imagine that you are not inspired by your reality. Of course, you don't need to take a political position, but you can always look in the other person's eyes, and you don't need to be in any kind of orientation to see if that person is humiliated or not. And I think that we have this certain responsibility, not as writers, but first as people and the part of the human race. We need always to do something if we can.
Thank you both very, very much.
And thank Indeed, and thank you, Fergal. Could I now please ask you to take your seats and leave the stage, and to invite Zenia Tompkins to take a seat on stage. And I'd also like to welcome Tanja Maljartschuk, who I believe should be joining us remotely. There we are. So welcome. And over to you, Uilleam and Selma, for this segment.
Good evening, Tanja. First of all, thank you so much for this wonderful novel. It was such a joy to read and a joy to discuss among the judges. This is a novel which is a historical novel. It's about Ukrainian history. It's about a very tumultuous time in Ukrainian history when we're talking about the collapse of empire, the formation of a new Ukrainian state, or the attempt to make a Ukrainian state, a time when borders, identities are in flux. And it's very much a novel which looks at these problems. And it has a, as we'll hear in a moment, it has a central character who is a Ukrainian by choice. He's of Polish origin, but he chooses to be Ukrainian at this very important time. And are we listening to the excerpt first, or shall I ask a question?
Sure, yes, I think we should.
Yeah, so I think I'll ask the question after we've listened to a short reading from your book.
Václav? Clara was still waiting for an answer. That's when Lipinski first shot out his new weapon, the socially unacceptable one that he would later take out of his holster frequently to protect himself. Don't call me Václav, I'm Vyacheslav. His father nearly choked on the cutlet. His mother squealed. His brothers and sister exchanged silent glances. To make things worse, Lipinski was talking in Ukrainian, a language, though it wasn't even a language, just a rural dialect, a hodgepodge of Polish and Russian, the Lipinski family had never heard emerge from the lips of an educated person, only from the local poor. Did something happen that we should know about? Klara Lipinska asked, trying with all her might to remain calm. She was a small woman, but an authoritative one. I consider myself Ukrainian. The newly minted Vyacheslav rejoined quietly, almost inaudibly. His confidence was gradually dissipating. His stoop was becoming ever more noticeable. Finally, Klara Lipinska erupted. What kind of Ukrainian are you? You are a Pole, son. All of us are Poles, from our great-grandfathers on down. Lipinski's head hung in silence. It was evident that he wasn't in agreement, that he wasn't planning to budge. But he didn't have enough of an argument or an effective rebuff yet. This was what he always did in situations like this. He'd keep quiet to brace himself to feel the oncoming attack. Klara Lipinska knew the strait better than anyone and was now shaking with enfeebled rage. He had always been like that, unreliable, weak, emotionally fragile, and now, for the love of God, he had definitively gone mad.
So my question, I hope Tanja is back with us. Yes, she is. I'm very interested in your choice of protagonist. So this very interesting and quite eccentric man who went against so many, I guess, expectations and conventions of the time. Could you tell us why he was so interesting for you and why you chose this figure for your novel?
Hello, everyone. It's an honor to be here, to be shortlisted with such a beautiful female writers. I have a big respect for them, and I wish each of them every success. To your question, I choose Lipinski because I was kind of fall in love with him. I suppose he was one of the most important and most, for me, for sure, most intelligent and clever philosophical thinkers at that time. And but the most important thing for me was that his idea of a political nation, which was for that time very new and very not established at all. This idea is very close to me at all. I think it's the only one possibility that people could, how people could live together. And so that was actually I wrote the novel for. I wrote the novel for almost 10 years, I think. Yes, and I tried to reclaim my own story and the story of my community, my parents, through the history and through the story of Vyacheslav Lipinski. Because for years our history was erased and twisted, and many of the people who kept this memory were killed, and their graves were eliminated, as also from Lipinski. There is no grave from him. You know, the history is a political thing. That's why I tried to write a historical novel. It was my first try, because before I have written only absurd, unrealistical stories about some small little people in Kyiv or in Ivano-Frankivsk, where I'm from. So that was the first time I tried to write about history, and because I thought if you don't write about your history, somebody else will do that for you. And on this point, I would like to remember words of British Prime Minister David Lloyd-George at the peace conference in Paris in 1919. He called Ukrainians not a nation but a group of barbarians, and he met some just now in corridor, and he doesn't want to meet them more. So, you know, this was Ukraine, and I think the whole history of Eastern Europe history was present but not seen, and it caused many. It determined the history of this region for many years. I think in Ukrainian writers try to now to find the way to tell the history, their own history. So it was only first try for me, not maybe perfect, but I hope this tradition will go further, even while Russian missiles fall and families grieving their dead. But I believe this is the moment of rethink and retell the history of Eastern Europe and Ukraine, especially.
Can I ask you also, just as a quick follow-up to that, at the moment, history is very much being politicized and used as a weapon in this conflict. How does it change the way you think about your own responsibility as a writer who writes about history, especially after 2022?
Yes, it's hard to think about that, but you know, I'm a little bit in this in fourth year of the big war, how we call it. After 2022, I am a little bit disappointed on my work, on a book, or on a literature, I would say, as a whole, because I don't see how I can change this unfair world. You know, and every writer, I think, has this little hope he or she can change something. and then you lost your friends on the war, and then you live with this every day with death, and it's not the best time to write novels. But I don't know. If we lose the hope at all, then there is no point to live. So that's why I think that it's hard.
It is, but we're very, very grateful for you for doing this at such a difficult time. I think, Selma, you have a...
Sorry for my bad English.
It's not bad at all.
Really good to hear from you, Tanja. I just wanted to ask Zenia one quick question. In terms of, I understand from you, you speak 4 languages, but Ukrainian, this book is the Ukrainian language is so central to this book itself, this novel. What did you learn through the act of translation about the Ukrainian language that you didn't know before?
I learned a lot about Ukrainian history. I don't think I was really thinking in terms of language when I was working on this novel, partly because I've translated a book of Tanya's before, and Tanja and I have known each other for years, so that the part of working with the language was reflexive and instinctive for me. There was a whole lot on the history and that I didn't know. I'm not a trained Ukrainian studies person, My last time reading Ukrainian history, I think I was 17. So there was a history angle that I had to research to be able to figure out how to present in English. And one of the proved a challenge was that I think the book was written in large part to Ukrainians who would understand passing references that were made about history. And then I'm sitting there going, okay, I need to Google this in German or in Polish or in Ukrainian because I don't know what she's talking about. And I lost my editor, 2 pages back. So there was a lot of, there was a lot of kind of discovering of a history to be able to figure out how to present it to someone who doesn't know Eastern Europe, who doesn't know Ukraine.
Thank you both, and indeed to my fellow judges. Could I please ask you, Zenia, to take a seat back here, and I would like to ask Antonia Lloyd-Jones to join us, please. I would also like to welcome Olga Tokarczuk. I hope we have her on a remote link. Yes, we do. Welcome to you both. The 2018 Nobel laureate, I should say. Thank you so much for joining us. The Empusium, consummately translated from Polish by Antonia Lloyd-Jones on my left, and published by Fitzcarraldo, is among many other things a masterfully paced and rapier-sharp satire set in a TB sanatorium on the eve of the First World War. We're going to hear a video extract. See it, in fact.
He found the guest house door wide open, which surprised him. Then he noticed a little prayer book on the ground in front of it, tossed into a puddle. The cream-colored pages were already soaked with dirty water. He picked it up and went inside, full of sudden anxiety. The sitting room downstairs was empty. The other residents must all have been at their treatments. He placed the mud-stained prayer book on a small table and was about to head upstairs when his attention was drawn to the half-open door to the dining room and noted a pair of boots on a table, somehow familiar. Without thinking, as if hypnotized, he went up to the door and pushed it to take a closer look inside. The boots were at one end of a long bundle of imprecise shape, which turned out to be a human body. It was lying on the table, at which the meals were eaten. It looked well wrapped in rolls of material. It seemed to be wearing a large number of skirts, shirts, bodices, and capes. Voynich had never seen any woman so close and so still before. They always flitted past in constant motion. It was impossible to focus attention on them and take in all the details. But here, before him, lay a woman's body, without doubt, a dead one.
Thank you. I'd like to start by asking you, Olga, what was your interest in placing what is in many ways a murder mystery in this Gothic setting, in a historical setting I've described? And what, if any, is the novel's relationship to Thomas Mann's 1924 novel, The Magic Mountain?
The relation to Thomas Mann, Magic Mountains, is obvious for everybody who reads. And this is my favorite novel. I've read several times in my life, and I which really admire. So there are some parts I know by heart. And but I also thought reading this book, I don't know, 8th or 9th time, that after 100 years, because Magic Mountains was written in 1924, so 100 years ago, that such a lecture needs, in a way, kind of warm, sensitive criticism, because today we see that the world is completely different. So my starting point was that there is no women in this book. Why? What's happened? Why he, this great author like Thomas Mann, was spend a lot of time, I think many years of writing this novel, just skipping the presence of women, how it is possible. And this is also the starting point to the broader reflection about our culture, that our culture is misogynic. And your first question was why this Gothic scenery. This is this place where I used to live in Poland. This is southern part of Poland, which has a very turbulent history. And it's a Kotlina Kłodzka. Before the war, it was German. Before Germans, it was Czech. Before Czech, it was once again Polish. So everything is very, liquid. Everything is not stable. So it seems to me that this is the definition of Central European literature.
Thank you. Antonia, can I come to you? Now, you've translated more than one of Olga's novels. I wondered how you would describe her language, really. And did this novel, with its historical setting and the Gothic atmosphere, and as we were saying before, a lot of humor, actually, did it pose particularly any challenges or delights?
Well, one of the things about Olga is that I always call her the Stanley Kubrick of literature, because every book is completely different, and she kind of reinvents the novel on a regular basis. And although I'm familiar with her style, obviously, because I've translated a lot of her work and we've spent time together, we've known each other for a long time. So that helps. But this particular book, I was just worried that maybe I ought to know The Magic Mountain well. And the reader, just to reassure you, doesn't have to know The Magic Mountain at all to read this book. But I felt as a translator it would be a bit of a fraud if I didn't. I had made some attempts but never got to the summit in the past. And then I found that I'd been reading a very old translation which starts with an apology for translating it so badly, which is the poor Helen and Low Porter, who I feel very sorry for. And then there's a later one, which I read. I have terrible problems with names. I think he's called
Davis, John Davis, the American translation of it. I apologize for not getting the name right. And I got past base camp and I got right to the top of the mountain, and it was fantastic. And I can see where Olga is making use of man's style in Empusium, because he's very, very detailed in his descriptions, and so is she. And she's very good at manipulating the reader sensually, and I think this partly comes out of his writing, but it's also where she and he overlap, because this book is full of things that you see. It has visual effects in it all the time, but you're not quite sure what you're looking at. Like the scene that was read, where the chap's not quite sure what he's seeing, but it turns out to be a dead body lying on a table. And there's a lot of strange tastes and smells and sounds, and that sensuality is very important in this book. And so I was glad that I read Man and got something of his style into my head and got some sense of how Olga was, well, using him probably, but also inspired by him, and is a writer inheriting something from a previous writer.
Thank you. And Olga, I'd just like to come back to you lastly. That you mentioned, obviously, the misogyny, but the characters voice a whole raft of misogynistic views about women, their place in the world, and so on in this novel. And there's an afterword about where these views come from that reads like a who's who of Western civilization, from Darwin and Freud to Milton and Kerouac and so on. Now, what was it like to steep yourself in this writing, which you obviously did? And was there a kind of soft vengeance in paraphrasing these views for your own purposes?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I really do believe that all the books we write always refer to a large extent of those already written. This is the culture. Literature is a great source of our knowledge about ourselves. And if you staying in your library or in library of your parents, and you are reading all those classical books, and then you can suck the entire knowledge from those books, and this knowledge is a little bit poisoned. So it means that you are always also poisoned, and this misogyny is going from one generation to the other generation. I don't know why misogynic attitudes are so popular, and we are also witnesses very contemporary situation that we have not only in the authoritarian state somewhere, far from our space, but also in our cultures, that this misogynic point of view is still very present and alive. I don't know what to do, really. I just, in my book, I try to refer to the classic, because in this way I understand the literature and the tradition, literary tradition, but also to pay attention and to also believe that I'm going to, I also sincerely hope that it makes you, my readers, think about it.
Thank you so much, Olga and Antonia. Can I ask you to take your seats? Thank you, everyone. 3 marvelous novels, and this was an extremely difficult and close decision. But there can be only one winning book. So now could I please ask the judges to take your seats, and for the finalists to take their seats up on the stage, all the finalists.
So the big moment has arrived, and I'm very happy to have here with me the envelope, and I'd like to ask the Secretary General, Kazuhiko Koguchi, to come back and open it and announce the winner. Kazu.
Thank you very much. So the winner for the EBRD Literature Prize for this year is Sons, Daughters, written by Ivana Bodrožić and translated by the Ellen Elias-Bursać. Congratulations.
Just wait there a second. You're allowed to say something if you like. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Sorry. Microphone.
Can I sit?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. I wrote something, although I didn't believe it, but I will read you something short. It will be easier for me. Okay, 2 evenings ago, I was sitting in my apartment thinking about what is the point? What is the point of going on a trip to London? What is the point of packing bags? What is the point of writing books? In the dilemma of giving up on the trip, I called my friend Zrinka. She told me, "You cannot do that. We already had a war. Ours, and then the others in recent years. We have the spread of fear and panic every day. So now you don't read the news anymore. If something important happens, I'll let you know. Giving up is out of the question." Mira sent me a message. "Go for Royal Flash. My cards are on you." She is my friend who is 70 years old and treats people as a doctor who are waiting for asylum in Croatia. She published her first book this year. I realized that I had to pack because of their kindness and a few other reasons. I cannot let down Ellen. Because of her translation, my novel sounds like it was written by a real writer. I cannot let down my children. They don't really read because they are teenagers, but they cheer the most. Nor my mom, who hugs me at the door and says, "Everything will be fine," but don't trust everyone there. In a world where there is so much uncertainty, from climate collapse to irresponsible people in a position of power, to technology that has spectacular and ever more destructive power, sometimes it is not easy to find meaning. We cling to our existence, and in this idea that we are unique and alone, comfort escapes us. And yet, as I stand here, it is clear that I find that meaning in literature. Just because I stand here, I don't think that I'm special in any slightest way. Precisely because we are so similar, we can understand each other well, even in other languages. But what makes us special is the mark that we leave on other people's life. Seeking meaning in story that comforts us, that restores our human dignity, that will one day remain as the best of us. That is why I would like to thank Olga and Tanja for everything they have given us in their extraordinary books. To the publishers who spread our ideas, to the jury who considered them important. And since I have the opportunity to stand here for just a little longer, and you must listen to me, I have just two requests. Be kind. And other one, giving up is out of the question. Thank you so much.
I just want to thank EBRD for organizing this prize and for giving voice to the writers from the part of the world that you represent, and to Ivana for her writing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ellen.
Congratulations indeed to Ivana and Ellen. Of course, that means that the two joint runners-up and finalists of the Literature Prize for this year are Forgottenness, written by Tanja Maljartschuk and translated from the Ukrainian by Zenia Tompkins. And we will present them. We'll give that to Zenia. And we will, of course, be sending Tanya's trophy to herself. And also, of course, the Empusium, written by Olga Tokarczuk and translated from the Polish by Antonia Lloyd-Jones. Excellent.
Congratulations to the winners and all the finalists. In Sons, Daughters, Jean-Dominique Bauby's stroke memoir, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, meets Jeanette Winterson's Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit. At its heart, a tenderly redemptive love story that has the power to transform how we see the world, others, and ourselves. So before Edward wraps up and we celebrate, I'd just like to thank the small dynamic team at the bank who work year-round on this prize. Edward, of course, Baigelmar Sanjav, Kate Powell, and Hazel Fonsing, and of course, all the judges and finalists. Back to you, Edward.
And of course, I want to reciprocate the thanks to Maya, Uilleam, Selma, and Fergal for their work over many months, and of course, to the finalists that we were delighted were able to join us this evening for the celebration of the incredible work that we are delighted to showcase. Those of you lucky to be in the room will have the chance to buy these outside here from an independent bookseller, David Brett. And those of you watching online will have a QR code, I believe, that will allow you to order these books online. And the authors and translators who are here have also very kindly agreed to do some signing in the first 20 minutes of the reception. I hope you'll allow them also to have a drink, and I would also encourage the rest of you to join us outside for a reception and continue the conversation. And again, thanks to everyone here who made this all possible.